Eighth graders, how you doing? This is Mr. Garnett Cook. I hope you had a good week and had a good weekend. This week we are moving away from immigration and into our last unit of the year, which is titled U.S. in a Turbulent World: The Struggle for Human Rights and the Responsibility of World Power. And our primary focus in our last few weeks together is going to be how and why the United States went from really being a regional economic power in the late 19th century to being one of the world's preeminent superpowers by the end of World War II. So, what we're going to be learning about is that transformation. And, if we have time, some of the consequences of that transformation, which we're still dealing with to this day. Um, a big focus of this is the struggle for human rights in the 20th century, and particularly with the world wars. It was an unprecedented time when it comes to risks to human rights around the world. I always like to use statistics to drive home a point. And to do that, I'm going to show you some numbers. What I'm going to be showing you are World War II numbers. I'm going to be showing you different countries, the total number of people who died in those countries as a direct result of uh, participation in the war, and the number out of that total that were civilian deaths. So, for example, if we look at the United Kingdom in World War II, 350,000 people from the UK died in World War II. Of that, 100,000 were civilians. If you look at China, 10 million approximately Chinese died in World War II, approximately 6 million of whom were civilians. In Japan, one of the United States' primary enemies in World War II, 3 million Japanese people died in World War II. Of that 3 million, 1 million were civilians. In Poland, 8 million Poles died in World War II, of whom 6 million were civilians. And then that number includes people who died in the Holocaust. In Germany, another one of the United States' primary enemies in the war, 6 million Germans died in World War II, approximately 1 million of whom were civilians. Italy, a slightly lesser player in the war, nonetheless, 450,000 Italians died in World War II, out of which approximately 150,000 were civilians. The Soviet Union, a nation that was formed out of a combination of a bunch of previously independent nations, such as Russia, Georgia, Ukraine, Lithuania, Estonia, a bunch of other countries. 24 million people from the Soviet Union died in World War II, 16 million of whom approximately were civilians. What you're getting from these numbers so far is not just the sheer size of World War II, the number of people killed. There was an estimated 50 million people who died in World War II, but the astonishingly large number of those deaths, of which were non-combatants, civilians caught in the crossfire, or in many cases, deliberately targeted. And then we get to the United States. And what I'm going to show you here with the United States is first the total number of people from the US killed in World War II, and the number out of that total that were killed who are civilians and died as a result of enemy fire. Now, the number you're going to see is just what we call the lower 48 states, the continental United States. Does not include Alaska, does not include Hawaii, does not include US civilians killed overseas, just the number of people who died here in the United States as a result of enemy fire. And this is the number: 450,000 people from the United States died in World War II, out of whom 6 were civilians. That's not 6,000 or 600,000. 6 people in the continental United States died in World War II as a direct result of enemy fire. Here's a short version of the story. During World War II, Japan initiated what ultimately was a failed strategy against the United States, which was the launching of what were called balloon bombs. And the strategy was that Japan would launch these balloons with explosives attached to them. They would launch them from destroyers out in the Pacific Ocean. The idea was that the Pacific winds would carry them east toward the west coast of the United States. These balloons were then designed to descend, and then once they hit land, these explosives would explode, setting off fires and things like that along the west coast of the United States. Well, the balloon bomb strategy was mostly a dud. It didn't really work. There were some that did explode. Most of them landed and did not detonate. Uh, I believe it was 1944, there was a family of 6 people who were in a state park in Oregon who were out on kind of like a family outing. And while they were walking through the woods, they came upon an unexploded balloon bomb. And they were naturally curious and started playing with it. And apparently it detonated and it killed all 6 members of this one family. They were the only 6 civilian deaths in the continental United States as a direct result of enemy fire. It That number brings forward a very important point about World War II, which was also true about World War I, which is how different the war experience was for the United States than it was for other countries. The United States itself did not experience nearly the impact of war that other countries experienced. We were mostly untouched physically by the war. It's not to say that we didn't suffer psychologically or people didn't lose loved ones and things like that, but our cities weren't bombed. We were never under direct attack in the continental United States the way that people in other countries were. And so the war, much like this period in world history, was very different for the United States than it was for other major countries. And that's part of our story here, how the United States emerges from the chaos of World War II as a major world superpower. We're going to be learning in this unit about the growth of the United States. And we're going to begin, one of the assignments you're going to have this week will take us back to the late 19th century and what is known as the age of imperialism. This time period in which first European countries and then the United States were kind of locked in this global power struggle, each trying to acquire colonies around the world from which it could extract resources for its own use. This is a map of imperialism in the world in 1900. Different countries and territories they controlled all over the world. European powers were leading the way in this regard, and the United States was starting to get into this game of imperialism by the turn of the 20th century. World War I, you're going to be learning about also this week. We're not going to be spending a lot of time on the war. This week, you'll have a reading about the war. There are some primary sources you're going to get to look at. And what I really just want is for you to get a feel for what happened in that war and what the war was like. This is a great illustration of one major facet of World War I, which was trench warfare. It was a style of warfare that dominated World War I. And you'll have an opportunity to learn a little bit about that this week. World War I casualties. Going back to something I said before about World War II, here's a graph that shows you the number of casualties by country. And as you can see very clearly, much like World War II, World War I was a very different experience for the United States than it was for, say, a country like Russia or Germany, Austria-Hungary, France, or Great Britain. The United States was not nearly as impacted. And so the United States will come out of World War I in a very different position from other countries. The most important consequence of World War I that we'll be learning about is the rise of the Nazi Party in Germany and the rise of Adolf Hitler to power. It can be fairly said that had there been no World War I, there would have been no Nazi Party. We'll explain why in the coming weeks. The United States will come out of World War I as we get into the 1920s in a comparatively good economic position. The United States actually goes through an economic boom in the 1920s. This is a picture of Henry Ford. It's an automobile manufacturer standing next to his famous Model T. The automobile was a real symbol of America's economic power. And before the United States was really recognized as a world military power, it really was being recognized as a major world economic power. That economic boom of the 20s will not last. And by the time we get to the 1930s, hold on one second, the United States enters its greatest economic crisis in its history, the Great Depression. This is a picture of what is known as a shanty town. When people lost their jobs and their homes in the early 30s, people were building makeshift homes in sort of open air parks like this one to survive. and shanty towns popped up all across the United States. We'll learn a little bit about the Great Depression over the course of the next couple of weeks. The American president who will emerge during the Great Depression is one of the most important presidents in our history, is Franklin D. Roosevelt. He will be the U.S. president not only during most of the Great Depression, but during most of World War II as well. So, we'll get into his presidency and what made him important. Certainly, his involvement in these two major crises make him important, but things he does help make him significant as well. We'll get to World War II, and when we learn about World War II, we'll be learning that World War II is really two different wars being fought at the same time. There was a war in Europe that went from 1939 to 1945. And then there was a war in the Pacific that went from 1941 to 1945. There are certainly two wars that are connected to each other, but in many ways are distinct in terms of the countries involved, the way those wars were fought, and how they ended. We'll touch upon some of the famous events of World War II, including the Pearl Harbor attack. This is a picture of the USS Arizona battleship in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, that was sunk during the attack on Pearl Harbor. We'll be learning a little bit about D-Day, which was the Allied invasion of Western Europe in June of 1944, trying to push the Germans out of Western Europe, rid Europe from the tyranny of the Nazis. And we'll be doing a little bit on the war in the Pacific. This is the most famous picture, probably in all of World War II, at least from the American side. This is a famous flag-raising picture on the island of Iwo Jima in February of 1945. My guess is many of you have seen this image before. And then we'll get to some other things. For example, during World War II, we have the issue of Japanese internment that we will touch upon. Japanese and Japanese American people who were forced from their homes during the war and relocated to basically concentration camps in various parts of the western part of the United States. And then we'll get to the events that end the war, most significantly being the development of nuclear weapons. The United States was the first country to develop nuclear weapons, and to date, the United States is the only country that ever actually used a nuclear weapon against another country. This is a picture of the mushroom cloud from a nuclear explosion over the city of Nagasaki in Japan, August 9th, 1945. And it was the atomic bombings of Japan that will bring about the end of the Second World War. The United States will emerge from the Second World War as a major power. This is a famous picture from the American victory when the war ended. This is the famous sailor kissing nurse photograph from Times Square in Manhattan. This was all over the news at the time. It's become one of these iconic World War II photographs. And it kind of represents the United States as this victorious power emerging from the war as one of the preeminent powers in the world. And so this is the story we're telling over our remaining weeks. The United States in this turbulent World War period, but coming out of it as one of the world's great superpowers. And that's what we're going to be learning about, the how and why of those things over our remaining weeks together. This week, you'll be learning a little bit about the age of imperialism, a little bit about World War I. We'll primarily be focusing on the period after World War I, between the wars, leading up to and including World War II. Anyway, hope you all have a good week, folks. Talk to you soon. Bye.